So I've decided to take the valves out and I'm going to grind them back in. I bought off a well-known auction site this valve spring compressor. It actually cost me the pricely sum of £10.75, or it could have been £10.25, I can't remember. You can't buy a Wetherspoon's breakfast for that, I don't think. That is super cheap. Now, I'm not into buying cheap stuff, but if I use it once, it's worth £10.75. I've managed to take one valve out so far, and it was quite simple. I'm going to take one out to show you. The only thing I did adapt is I put two rubber sleeves on here, because this handle kept falling out all the time. You've got several different sizes for 7 different valves, so let's try and get one out. I've used the box it came in to store my valves. So pop that up there. I'm just going to pop you down and then we'll have a go at taking a valve out. So I've already taken one out. I'm just going to take another inlet valve out. This is number 2. This is the problem side. So this is just a wind-in valve spring compressor. I have had in the past the hinged ones, but I gave those away a long time ago. I should have kept them now. Looks pretty good. Just going to use a magnet and a screwdriver to try and flick them off. There's one. Trying to keep everything in order. The valve collets I don't think really matter. Oops, lost you there. And we're back. Just remember there are 2 springs there. So this was the problem piston. Like the other one I just took out, very clean. There are some marks in the middle there, but it doesn't look worn. If you think that looks bad or good, let me know. I'm just going to have to check that one to make sure it's straight, because that was, like say, the problem piston. But it looks okay. So those are the inlet. They are generally cleaner, I would have thought, because petrol's flowing over them all the time. I'm just going to check one of the exhaust valves. just try one of these. Let's just take number 2 out, because again, like I say, that was the one we were having issues with. Straightforward. That's number 2 exhaust. So you can see there a little more sooty. Let me get up there. So you can see there it's a little more sooty. But we'll see what it's like when I clean them up. But it doesn't look too bad, in all fairness. There's a bit of a ridge there, but that's obviously where it's hitting its maximum travel. Okay. So I'm going to continue taking the rest of these out, and then we'll get back to you in a second. You don't need to see me taking 8 valves out at the same time. But the £10.75 valve spring compressor, what more do you want for the price of 2 pints of beer? So fast forward a couple of minutes and all the valves are now out. That was quite easy, and like I say, I'm very impressed with the very cheap valve spring compressor. Let's have a look at the head first of all. I'm not sure you can see that particularly well in this light. Put the torch on. So nothing looks out of the ordinary. I might, or I'd like to have the head blasted. I might even buy a small blasting cabinet myself. It'd come in really, really handy. I'm just going to turn us over and we'll have a look at the valve seats. So these are the valve seats in the cylinder head. Maybe a bit of light will help. I'm not sure if that's better or not. But by rubbing a fingernail over these areas, nothing seems untoward. Even the second cylinder, which is the problem area, yes, there's a couple of marks here, which I can grind down probably. I can't see that affecting anything. There's nothing in the areas where the valve seat is. And when I took the pistons out, when I took the valves out, nothing felt sloppy. You know, I'm going to try and check the valve guides, but it all felt pretty good. So I'm going to get myself a grinding stick and some grinding paste. I did have one, but I can't find it. I used that many years ago. Actually, I'm going to try and clean this up and see what we can make of it. Let's just take a look at the valves. So this is number 1 exhaust valve. Yes, it's a bit sooty, and remember this bike has been sitting for a long time. So I'm going to try and clean these up a little bit. They're all pretty consistent. Like I say, even number 2. There's no marks on there. It doesn't appear to be bent. That said, let me just put it in a drill and turn it over slowly. Now, I'm not sure if this is a particularly technical way of checking if your valve is straight, but putting it in a drill and turning it around slowly, it doesn't appear to be bent. I'll check them all like that and see if it's consistent. So this is number 1 cylinder. There's nothing wrong with that. And there's a little bit of movement in all of them, I would say, because obviously this isn't a particularly scientific way of testing it. So I'm not going to go through all of the valves with you, but they all look very similar. So what I'm going to do is put them in a drill like I just did and try to clean them down with a bit of rough cloth. Should get most of that off. So I'm now just going to clean the valves up. This is an exhaust valve. You'll probably find they're a little bit more soiled than the petrol ones, because obviously petrol's coming in and it's quite clean, and you've got sooty exhaust gases going out. So I'm going to clean them up by taking the worst of this off with a chisel, clamping it in my drill, and I'm going to use a rough abrasive pad and then quite a fine abrasive pad or cloth. So that's the worst of it off. There we are, that looks a lot better. Still a little bit on there, but I'm not going to go mad. It's going to be ground in as well. So this is the inlet. It's not as badly soiled as the exhaust. Good. So that's 2 done, 1 of each. They're not looking too bad, and they're going to be ground in, of course. Okay, so another 6 to go. There we go, so there are all the valves all cleaned up nicely. The valves of number 2, which again was the problem cylinder, they've cleaned up quite nicely as well. They don't appear to be bent. Now I'm going to just try and grind them into the head. So I've got myself a new pot of grinding paste and a stick. I did find an old pot, I couldn't find the stick. This has got to be, this has to be 30 years old. There's not a lot in it, so I must have done a lot of valve grinding in the past. Probably the last vehicle I did this on was probably something like a, I don't know, a Cavalier or a Ford Capri. There's not a lot in there. I'm sure there's nothing wrong with it, but I will use the new stuff. I've got the head tilted up slightly so that when I'm grinding in a downward motion as opposed to being at a funny angle. I got some petrol and a rag, so if I can remember how to do this properly, you start grinding in with coarse grinding paste, then you go to fine grinding paste, and then if you use a little bit of petrol and a rag and wipe around the seat, let's have a look at one. When you wipe around the seat area, it should be all a consistent grey sort of colour, as opposed to this one, which isn't. Now remember, I cleaned this up with a bit of abrasive pad, but I doubt it would have been seating properly anyway. So like I said, I'm not sure where this engine build is going, but I find grinding valves in quite therapeutic. So sticking your plunger on, and when you do it, make sure you're working in that kind of fashion, lifting it down, lifting down. I've cleaned out the valve stems just to make sure there's no dirt or crud in there. We don't want to be grinding that in. And when you put valve paste on, very small amount. You don't need a lot. Try not to get it on the valve stem, and you'll hear you can hear the grinding motion. Maybe a little bit more than that actually. Silly me. I've put an inlet into the exhaust. I thought that didn't sound right. Luckily I noticed that quickly. Because the engine's flipped over, you can get a little bit confused sometimes. So inlets, exhausts, exhaust, valve. So I think that might be too big. Yeah, so a little plunger on that side. So simple mistakes to make, be careful. Come on, stick. Stick to the stick. Okay, let's try the bigger one, it seems to fit better. That's better. So you can hear that sounds totally different than the last one because obviously it wasn't sitting in properly. So I'm not going to expect you to watch this for what could take an awful long time. I'll periodically bring you back in. See how quiet that's gone? It's kind of ground in nicely. I'm just lifting it slightly every now and again. Let's have a quick look at that. Okay, still quite a lot of work to do there. There's no real pressure, just let it sit in its seat and give it a little rub. So I've been doing this one for about 5 or 10 minutes. What you can do as well, rather than wasting all the grinding paste, is just take it off and re-smear it on. And then go again. I would wipe it off every now and again just to make sure you're not having an excessive build-up of grinding paste, because it don't want it falling into the head. Let's wipe that with a rag and some petrol. So we're starting to get a more consistent colour. I think I'll keep going with this for a minute. I want to make sure it's all good. When it looks reasonable, then I'm going to go over it with fine. Okay, so here's the end result of valve number 1, and I'm reasonably happy with that. That's the valve seat. I'll take a photo as well because it makes it a little bit easier to see. So you've got to be careful how long you take on this. You know, you could take forever. This one valve has probably taken me over an hour. So you can imagine the costs of labour if you've got this done in a garage. And would they do it as thoroughly? You know, they might rush it, you know, for one thing or another just to save you money, save them time, I guess. So it's a bit of a labour of love. We're just going to go on to number 2. I have cleaned the cylinder head and the bore, or the bores. I used a rotary wire brush on this, a very, very fine one. It came with a multi-tool, like a Dremel type of thing. I wouldn't use a really, really aggressive one. Actually, it wasn't a wire brush, it was a copper brush they are softer, very, very light. Actually, it broke into several pieces after I did it. This was the damaged head. You still see some marks from it there. There's a mark there. Looks like somebody's tried to prise the head off in the past with a screwdriver, probably. So I've polished this up. It looks reasonable. I've wire brushed all this. I've cleaned the bores up, or the head of the bores. And what I used for that, like I say, is some wet and dry. I folded it around this rubbing block, otherwise it would catch as you went over it. And I sprayed some WD-40 on it. That helped for lubrication. Other oils are available. Again, all the keyboard warriors are going to be telling me you shouldn't use sandpaper, you shouldn't do this, shouldn't do that. Well, don't do it then. Do what you like on your own bike. This is what I decided to do. This is 1200 grit paper, and with oil on it you could rub that on a baby's arse for an hour and it wouldn't make any difference. It's very, very light. Just takes off all the residue of old gasket heads, gasket seals. Very smooth, very nice. Like I say, it won't affect the head, I wouldn't think. I'm no expert, don't follow me. Product placement for beer again, isn't it? I'm hoping for a bit of sponsorship. I'm going to measure some things like the valves. I'm going to be using the micrometer and the digital calipers just to measure things like valves, etc. On that note, catch you in the next video.